The last role that arms play, that I think is the most important and most misunderstood role, is arms are there to assist with creating lift. Like every single
Yeah,
step, we're leaving the ground. So like jumping, we throw our arms vertically up in the air to create a vertical force to jump off the ground, to either jump higher or get off the ground easier. Running is that easier end of the spectrum. Every single step, we're trying to leave the ground. So what we're going to do is like jump, like just do that same jump. And this is where timing becomes really important, because you're like, I absorb, I return. I absorb, I return. So you can actually use that arm swing movement just to understand what the timing feels like. And what you'll feel is I can actually get back off the ground easier and
yeah,
quicker, and maybe even jump a little bit higher, because now I'm actually swinging these two parts in a direction that's helping, rather than having my hands in my pockets and they're not helping. So you can
yeah,
still do it, but it's easier when you're actually making
yes.
that movement. Then if you started to do that as you run, then you're like, oh, that's actually helping me get off the ground. I am getting up, getting up, getting up. What they are doing is assist with that lift. What they're not is probably almost as important. They're not.
Paul, let's start by bringing the listener up to speed. So we did a one-on-one virtual session together 2 days ago, right? Where I put my iPhone on the tripod, got on FaceTime with you, and you made me run up and down an uncrowded parking lot. So first, you made me be very mindful of how different parts of my body was moving. You know, my arms, my fist, my upper legs, my knees, and my feet, right, were moving through space as I ran. Then you gave me very specific cues, one at a time, to focus on as I ran back and forth between my phone and the end of the parking lot and back. And by the end of the 1 hour session with you, I have to say that you managed to completely reframe how I thought about running form. I think I'll go as far as to say that not only was it a complete paradigm shift for me, but also to a certain extent a breakthrough in feeling much lighter on my feet and, dare I say, springier in my stride. So I think this conversation would be very valuable for anyone listening that is feeling stuck in their running form, whether it's inefficiencies in the way they run that leaks energy, or just knowing that they could be moving through space a lot better and more effortlessly. And according to the stats that you shared with me 2 days ago, from what I remembered, is that over 95% of runners run with improper form. So to kick things off, let's start with talking about how much running form actually matters. So why is it worth someone's time and effort to work on improving their running form versus just running more and getting fitter?
The form matters because physics matter, okay, and how we maintain momentum when running, and essentially that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to maintain momentum for an extended period of time. The physics of maintaining momentum when running matter. So the movements creating those force and the direction of the force, and almost the symphony of movements put together, is going to assist with and be more helpful in creating, the force vector, which is most ideal, or make it harder by actually working against or outside those columns. Most other movements, particularly when it comes to locomotive, like when you're thinking about either, walking or cycling or skateboarding or swimming, there's specific understanding of like force vectors required to maintain a steady state or a pace. Whereas running, we've gone from the bottom up and just thought, oh, how is that person running? Are they injured or not? Are they fast or not? Let's leave it at that. But if we come from the other end, which is kind of the physics, and then biomechanics, which is the applied physics, the applied physics for a certain movement, and in this case it's running, there is a specific requirement or an ideal
Yeah.
requirement. So that's why it matters, and that's why the form matters, and the position matters, and movement matters.
Well, does improving running form also improve running economy in parallel? In other words, is it a performance lever?
It's definitely a performance lever. There's two parts to it. Like if you are moving more efficiently, you will be, or you can be more economical. I think in times of change, depending on what that change is, it can go two ways. So you can actually make an improvement in an efficiency sense, so cost per step,
Mhm.
which we can probably talk about a little bit later,
And when you say
as
cost per step,
opposed
as in
cost per step
oxygen
meaning
and
more about
metabolic
like
costs.
like more the force requirement. Okay, so like the
Okay.
impact and then the propulsion requirement. So that's kind of more force related rather than, like oxygen related, which is kind of more the economy. So in some
Mhm.
cases, like a change of biomechanics and change of form can be a decrease in economy because it's not your conditioned movement pattern. However,
Okay.
it will be in a manner and using parts or prioritizing parts of the body that is actually more efficient and can be conditioned better and at a more accelerated rate, as opposed to a minor movements, minor muscles prioritized will take longer, and their capacity is lower. So that's one option. So it can actually decrease economy in the short term, but create a larger bullseye for the long term. But as you felt, like if there is an improvement in the efficiency, like you will feel it. So it's not just a different type of feeling and being told, no, that's better for you. And I think this is where we've kind of gone wrong with running. It's like, you should run this way because that's what I've been taught, or this is a method. It's like, no. If it's an improvement, it will feel improved. However, the economies can be differed immediately. One can be a drop in economy because it's an unconditioned movement, but another can be an improved economy because you're already fit. You're just using better muscles because you've done all the strength work and you've strengthened all the more ideal components of the body, and now you're actually tapping into them. So it's like, I've actually had an improvement in economy and efficiency.
Is it very common for someone to actually feel that inefficiency as they're making the form changes? Or is that only just a small subset of people that actually have a decrease in efficiency?
In my experience and with the people I've worked with, I think it's more of the minor end, because in the manner that we work, and again, you sort of started to touch on it about the process in which I go through. They are small single changes from top down, which can allow improvement rather than if we make a holistic pattern change, which can happen if you're coming back from injury. Like we can make a broader change because we're starting from scratch. Like it's cool. We can make a big change, holistic change, start from scratch, and you can go from your return to running a minute on, minute off for 20 minutes, but with this new movement pattern, because we're not just going into a 30 kilometer, an 80 kilometer, 160 kilometer week load and making this big broad change. And that's impossible. And it's really dangerous. So if we can do small pieces to the puzzle, often it is an improvement. I think you started to talk about before you started recording that the improvement is there. The feeling of lightness is there, but the concentration required to maintain it, that is really difficult. Because it's brand new. So mentally, like you can be fried, but physically can actually be an improvement.
Yeah. It's before I internalize it, right? Before I get that muscle memory, I had to think. I had to focus on each point, whether it's one elbow or the other elbow, not together. And like the way you made me do it was with every run out and back, I only focus on one point, and then we added the next. And then we added the next, and not 2 points at one time. And when I say 2 points, I meant maybe like left and right, not even upper and lower. Just if we focus on the right elbow, that means we're focusing on the right elbow, right? Yeah. And if I try to do 2 at one time, it didn't wire so well in my brain. Maybe that's just me, but yeah.
No, and everyone's a little bit different, so we're kind of layering the singularity of like the singular cue. And that was an arm swing cue. So it is essentially like one cue, but we go to left and then to right. And then even within that, because you had a slight asymmetry in your movement prior to that, how you relate or how you respond and how you actually, undertake that cue is a little bit different left to right. So then even just then sort of having minor changes to kind of even it out or make it symmetrical is going to be different. And then someone might be able to pick it up immediately and run with it, but take longer for it to become habit. Someone might need like each little bit of detail to make sure they're getting it right. And then they'll be able to implement it really well, and they'll be able to like create habit a little bit quicker. And everyone's a little bit different. I've sort of found there's no rhyme or reason between who picks it up and who doesn't, and then we can go to the next cue, and that can completely flip. And it can be amateur and it can be elite. And then that can be completely flipped depending on the individual, depending on the cue. So yeah, in your case, it was just about detailing it and layering that kind of the implementation of a singular cue. Yeah, it took a little bit of detail.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but just so that the listener understands what you were saying is that, we picked up that not only was I structurally a bit asymmetrical, but my movement pattern was also functionally asymmetrical, right? So you were saying during our session that even with the structural asymmetry, which means physically my right shoulder is lower than my left, right? I have a bit of curvature in my spine. So that's that structural asymmetry. We can still aim towards trying to have a movement between left and right that is closer to symmetry. despite the structural asymmetry. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's in movement and in timing and in position. So in your case, the position is slightly different, or your feeling of what, like how the joint responds to a movement is going to be slightly different because of that structural asymmetry. But we're aiming to get as close as possible. But for some, it's either impossible or really difficult. But for some, it's actually quite possible. But they're moving in a manner that's not even close to it to start with.
I've read some stat that almost everyone has a certain level of asymmetry in their body. So maybe mine is a bit more pronounced, but none of us are perfectly asymmetrical.
No, well,
Symmetrical left
once
to
you
right.
start to, yeah, once you start to add like right and left side dominance, like the movement that you make consistently more one side than the other is going to create a difference. And even like often I'll do a session, and particularly the ones in person, and if they've got, a right side of dominance, they'll be able to rotate or do a simple twist easier one way than the other. So from habitual movement patterns of, picking up a bag, opening a door, maybe a
Yeah.
kid on the hip, or anything along those lines are going to or could influence those asymmetries. So it's not like, no, we got to be bang on and you have to be symmetrical. And everyone's going to be, and if you're not, there's a problem. But it's like then from that is like working within that and working within those parameters. I always think about, like we touched on the physics at the start, and I think about like three silos of importance for me about with running. And physics for me is at like the top, and we've kind of got a middle, which is the biomechanics, which is those applied physics to running. And applied physics means applied physics to any movement, but in this case, it's running. And then the third one is the individual. Now, we can't change, we can't outrun the physics. And the individual has their set parameters, like you're talking. So they're kind of the two most important parts. And what we're
The
trying to
boundaries, I
do
guess.
is, yeah, and we're trying to
Yeah, the
apply
boundaries.
the best case of the middle one,
The
given, the
biomechanics.
laws
Yeah.
of physics and the law of the individual. And we're just trying to make the
Correct.
best case of it. And there's no, set or someone that we're trying to line it up with. It's just like it's the top version using what we have of that bottom silo.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So we're trying to get the person to adapt within those boundaries to have the most efficient movement in a certain sense, also to counter the inadequacies of the asymmetry.
In some ways, or just like the inefficiencies of. But like it's even then, it's like we're trying to get the best case for that individual.
Let's talk a bit about the most common form errors that runners make. So could you just kind of break down what are the, when someone comes to see you in person, I'm sure you've seen tons of different mistakes, right? So what are some of the more common ones that people are making in terms of the way they move when they run?
So I guess we'll go from the top down, because that's definitely my approach.
Yeah.
Just no arm swing, no movement, no counter movement at all. So very tight, very restricted, zero happening up top, and then expecting to have some semblance of leg drive or swing or range of motion happening through. So we've got to think about what the arm swing is doing, and it is a counter movement to the leg. So we want to know if we've got a counter movement, then we can actually have a movement through the leg. But if there's none, there's nothing. So that'd be one. I guess the other end of the scale, or the other end of the spectrum, is like a big rotation movement. So if we've got big rotation or flat rotation movements, that's a big part of the body to be moving that costs a lot of energy and a lot of time. And it's a lot of lateral force that's happening. So it's not assisting or helping. It's actually costing a lot.
So you're talking about the two ends of the spectrum, right? So one is lack of movement, like a robot, and the other
Yep.
it's too much. Okay. And that's upper
Yeah.
body mainly.
Too much and in the wrong place.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
So I think we'll go to the middle, kind of the middle part, which is kind of the most important part. I think about the top down, but it's middle out. So the torso, the position we're in, the stillness and then therefore stability we can create. At one point or another, and we could go through a heap of shit cues, and I apologize for the swearing if I do through here, and you can keep it out, but I do swear a little bit. We can go through shit cues, but at one point or another, we've been taught to run tall, and that has meant, like people are arching and upright and head back, and that's actually, extending through thoracic. So it's tightening and bringing our mass back and stretching our diaphragm. Three things that we don't want. We don't want to be tight. We don't want to have our mass backwards, and we don't want to stretch our diaphragm, because they're all going to negatively affect how we move and how we can maintain that momentum, and then how we can breathe, or how we can actually utilize and prioritize muscles. So there's that is common, like upright and tight and thoracic extension.
I guess that's one of the shit cues, right?
That is, it's a shit
Okay.
cue because it's arching back and running tall, and it's not helping. Running tall is actually an outcome of movement. So we want to create height by, our vertical movements to get up off the ground, to stay high off the ground. It's actually through flight and float and less time on the ground. So height is not a body position. It is actually an outcome of our movements and staying high and maintaining that height. It's well intentioned, but really poorly executed and poorly coached, in my opinion, because it's the complete wrong thing. And then the last thing is just that classic overstride. So there's two movement patterns we really, we can kind of, or simplistic versions of two movement patterns. We can use the lower leg that leads the movement, that reaches forward and pulls back, and that is very much a horizontal plane of energy, and it whips over and comes forward. So it's that lower leg.
Like clawing forward with your legs, right? Yeah.
It is. And it is the classically described as an overstride. And it is where that lower leg and ankle gets in front of the knee, creates a braking force. It gets out in front, creates more ground contact time. But it's also like a negative vertical oscillation. So the further you reach out, the lower your center of mass comes before you can try and lever over your leg. So that's a lower leg dominated move as opposed to an upper leg dominated move. So the lower leg is probably one of the most common things that I see as well.
Does specific form errors lead to common running injuries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
go ahead. Sorry.
So we use that kind of example that we just used then. So like it's lower leg reaches out in front and creates a braking force. Now, often or more likely, we're not thinking about good landing, bad landing, but if we are reaching out and, having a heavy foot strike on the back of the heel, the primary shock absorber, or the primary shock absorbers that go through the ankle is pronation. Now we want pronation, but we want it as a part of the whole system. So if that is the primary shock absorber and then goes into the knee, it's like bracing through knee. You see a lot of tib post injuries, medial tibial stress or ITB, because it is a braking force going into that area. Now, the faster you go, the more stress that goes into the body, the more impact, the more cost per step. Those structures or those areas are like the ones that, have to cop it. If you add on top of that rotation, so, left shoulder rotates forward as right reaches forward, it's a really big lateral load. So there's things that happen over and over and over again that will load certain structures. And if they are those structures that are getting load or prioritized in load, they're the ones that are going to kind of break down.
Yeah, you mentioned load quite a few times in the last minute, right? And what I noticed after the session with you was, with the cues that you actually got me to go through, I felt like as I was running, I was deloading with every stride. So basically you kind of flipped that for me, right? So instead of loading and pushing, it was kind of deloading and going up. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through this conversation. So during our session together, the first thing that you got me to work on was my arm swing. So let's start there.
Well, before we do that, because you mentioned in the introduction, the very first bit was actually creating self-awareness. So asking you to get you to feel what movements you currently make. And it's super important for us within that session so that you can actually understand or tell the story as to why you might be, and we use the word load, why you've been loading the certain areas where you feel fatigue or where you get stress load injuries or just, pull up sore from. Like how we move is telling that story. So going through that process and piece by piece of like arms, shoulders, torso, legs, it gives the person a really clear understanding of how they move when they run. Most people don't even record themselves when they run and look at them because it can be confronting, let alone go through a self-awareness component, which is understanding how they currently move. It is as important as the cue, because if you can understand what it feels like.
Self-awareness is as important as the cue. Okay. Yeah.
It is, because like once you know what it feels like to return to, we use old way or at the start of the session, this is where I use like new way, old way. If you know what it feels like to return to old way, you can recreate that cue in a run by yourself. You don't need a coach or someone running around reminding you. Like it helps. But if you can actually feel yourself returning back and having like awareness markers of this feels like this when I'm doing old way. Oh shit, I got to switch new way back on. This is how we can create habit. Because the hardest thing about running is, we're doing something, 2.6 to 3.2 times per second. So that's how many steps we're taking, like a range of cadence.
Yeah.
That is a lot of movements in a single second. So if we're going to think of anything more than one thing at a time, it's impossible. So it's like, I'll do this on my arms, shoulders, relax, hold torso, land or lead with this part of the leg, push up in it. Too many things. So it's like, oh, fuck, I won't do any. I'll just go back to my normal way.
Yeah, because it's really internalized, right?
Yeah, and that internalizing is your ability to create change. So knowing what it feels like to return to old way, that self-awareness.
Sorry, can I just interrupt and just explain to the listener old way and new way? So when we did a session, you got me to run the way that I used to run, and
which is old way.
Which is old way, and then after I was very aware of each body part and how it was moving through space, you gave me cues to focus on each body part, and that became the new way. And then you got me to run old way, new way, old way, new way. So I became very aware of old way and new way, right? And just to go back, before our session, I thought I was quite aware, because every time when I go out to run, I'm thinking about my form. But the fact that you actually got me to think so specifically about each part, I became way more self-aware. Not in a bad way, but very mindful of how every part is really moving. If it makes any sense, right?
Way more self-aware. I hate it. No. That's true. But yeah, it's a really important part of the learning process. But then, as you said, like, we started by, making that arm swing change, but then it was not change this part of the body, change this part of the body, that change this. It was do new way and see how the new way affects this part of the body compared to old way return. So it wasn't actually making. So what you started to feel was, just by changing, and this is why it is a top-down approach, just by creating a more helpful arm swing, you could actually start to feel, how is that affecting my knee drive? How is that affecting my ground contact time? How is that affecting my, lightness or relationship with the ground? And it wasn't, we need to change all those things. They were actually all byproducts of just by changing that one thing at the top.
So arm swing, you got me to start by arm swing, and you just said that with the arm swing, it trickles down to all the different parts of your body and how it affects all that, right? And
or it influences, it influences the whole chain. Yeah.
And we don't always think about running as arm driven. We always think about running as legs driven, right? But what I noticed after the session, I think we focused mostly on arm swing and a bit more later on. But I think the biggest change that you made me make was arm swing. And just with that, I felt the way that I was moving completely changed after that just 1 hour. So how important really is arm swing, and what are the downstream, if you can go a bit more detail about what are downstream mechanical effects that a good and bad arm swing actually produces? If you're listening to this and thinking, I would love to improve my running form, Paul has an online membership called the Core Program of Cues. It's the same top-down approach to running mechanics that we discussed throughout this episode. If you'd like to try it, you can use the code ELP to get 25% off your first month. The link and discount code are in the show notes.
So we'll think about it as helpful, less helpful, rather than good and bad, because a lot of them are helping in a manner because they're giving a counter movement. So it is a help that it's like, okay, well, it's giving myself space for my leg to swing and counter swing, but it might not be as helpful as it could be because it's not necessarily working in a direction that is beneficial to work against gravity and create that force vector required to maintain momentum. So, slightly different. The way to think about running, it's a whole body movement. When we are running, nothing gets left at home and you just like tack it back on. It is a whole body movement. Now, we don't want the whole body to be moving when we are running. We need stillness and to create or allow stability. So there's parts of the body that need to be still. There's parts of the body that need to be moving. So then we kind of need to understand, like, what are the roles and responsibilities of each part of the body when we're running? And I think we haven't really started to or we don't fully understand and break down them as well as what we could. And if we don't do that, then we end up just job sharing through the whole body. And they'll do the job. They'll get you from A to B. But some parts will be trying to create or provide stability when they're not necessarily designed for it. Other parts will be trying to produce power and create propulsion when it isn't necessarily the best part, or the priority is somewhere else, should be somewhere else.
That's where the inefficiencies come in, right?
Yeah, the inefficiencies come in. So it's costing, like a small or a minor muscle a lot of its maximum to try and create this propulsive force when we've got big muscles that can do a better job of it, but we're not prioritizing them because the movement we create doesn't prioritize them.
And that's why fatigue sets in, and the bigger certain bigger muscles are a little bit less fatigable than some smaller muscles.
Exactly. But then like it's a repeat movement sport. We're doing it over and over and over, but it's so submaximal. Those smaller muscles or those minor structures can take it and can do it because it's not flat out, explosive. We're doing it, quite a submaximal, but they're not necessarily designed to do it at their maximum for that extended period of time. And so repetitive stress injuries, whether it be softer tissue, will normally happen in kind of like tendinopathies, or, repeat stress injuries into bones. Very rarely will the major muscles cop a beating and tear when you're doing the submaximal movements. But if we can actually prioritize those areas, they can absorb, they can condition a whole lot better than the others. If we just go back to like the question about the arms, like what role do arms play? They are the counter movers and counter time. So like counter movement and time work together. If you have too big a movement and too much time, the legs have to fit within that. So it becomes a big overdone movement. If it's an underdone movement, then the legs have to fit in. So it's like I'm restricted, so I've got to like spin quickly. So the movement and time work together.
Is it fair to say that the arm swing is where you actually control the timing?
It can, very much so, because it's. I like to see it as like it's like the drummer in a band. Like it sets the rhythm and timing, but it certainly doesn't produce force. It's not singing the ballad. Like it's not the. It's not getting the flashy, t-shirt with its face on the front. Like it is setting the rhythm and the timing,
like the conductor.
Yeah, it is like conductor. That's a much more sophisticated way of putting it. But that balance and timing is important, because if we don't have, as close to symmetry, if our movement is slightly off, or even the rhythm is actually left or right sided, then that is sending two different messages down the body. And we're trying to do that over and over and over again. So the rhythm and timing and balance are a role that arms can assist with or play a big part in. And then the balance in the other way is like, because we work with a lot of trail runners as well. If you're making lateral movements or rotation movements, like that's really hard to be balanced on an uneven surface when you're throwing your body left and right rather than in the correct direction.
And the ground is already throwing you left and right because
it's already you've got your body doing it and the ground doing it. At one point or another, it's just going to shoot off. Like you're going to shoot off one way or another. But at least if you are balanced and centered and controlled with your movements, then you can start to absorb and work within, what is an uneven terrain. The last role that arms play, that I think is the most important and most misunderstood role, is arms are there to assist with creating lift. Like every single step, we're leaving the ground. So like jumping, we throw our arms vertically up in the air to create a vertical force to jump off the ground, to either jump higher or get off the ground easier. Running is that easier end of the spectrum. Every single step, we're trying to leave the ground. And if you're making a sideways movement, or in your case, a down movement, it's like you're trying to jump, but you're throwing your arms down. I'm wondering why we can't actually get off the ground. I wonder why we can't jump very high. Because we are a summation of our movements. And the arm movement, if it is up, forward and up, back, every single step, what we're trying to do, or what they are doing, is assist with that lift. What they're not is probably almost as important. They are not power. They do not touch, well, ideally, hopefully, they do not touch the ground. So you're not applying force between the ground and your mass. So they are there to assist with time, balance, timing, and lift. And if we can get them right within our anatomy, because then even then it's like our glenohumeral joint, so our shoulder joint, the glenoid fossa, no one's joint is at 90 degrees to start with. So we're not trying to swing our arms straight. We've got to work within our joint angle. And even then, like the whole concept around swinging your arms straight, it's like, we want everything going in the same direction. Nothing's going in the same direction. One arm's going backwards, one arm's going forward. Nothing's going in the same direction unless we get both arms swinging up. Then we've got things going in the same direction. We want to swing within our anatomy.
Okay, I want to make the point that, well, you made the point that one of the main purposes of the arm is to create lift, right? And for me specifically, how I used to run before our session was the complete opposite. I used my arm to drive down and back. And I thought I was helping to push backwards and go forward, right? But what you reframed for me was that the arms is actually helping deload the weight of the body as you're driving up and forward, right? Kind of like a 75 degrees up, you're aiming this way up. And with that deload, well, think of someone, think of someone trying to do a pull up and they're not very strong. What do? You kind of lift your legs up as you
Well,
pull,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
To
Yeah, you
deload.
try and drive your knees up.
Yeah, you drive your knees up so that your legs deload a bit, and then it's easier for you to pull up. And it makes so much sense that when we are working with our hands going up or driving upwards, we are deloading the weight and we're kind of lifting our whole torso up with every stride. And there's less work or there's less weight that is put on our feet when we're hitting the ground, right? It's almost like tapping the ground after, then landing and pushing, if I can describe it that way.
Yeah. So like we do need that land absorption and the push off component on it, but we want to make it easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's a down, and like running is a down up movement. We land, we push back up. We land, we push back up. We're not pushing the ground anywhere. It's not going anywhere. We're pushing our mass. Going back to the physics, is what are we trying to move? It's our mass.
Us.
We're not moving the ground. We're not moving anything else. It's our mass.
Not moving the ground. Yeah.
No, it's not going anywhere. So even that's like, we're trying to pull the ground, but no, we're not fucking trying to pull the ground. We're pushing our mass. This is our projectile. And we're trying to maintain this momentum by getting off the ground, because it's easier to maintain momentum when we're in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So the two things we're trying to reduce, we can't take away, but we're trying to reduce braking force, so the amount we have to absorb, okay, and ground contact time, the amount of time we're on the ground. If we can do those two things, but take the same amount of steps to cover the same distance, that is working easier. Like that is less stress on the body, because it is less braking force, less ground contact time for the same amount of steps. Now, in reality, if you have less braking force, less ground contact time, you will also take less steps to cover the same distance. So there's the efficiency. Like a simple version of efficiency is taking less steps with less ground contact time and less force on the body to cover the same distance.
Which means you would probably travel faster at the same cadence.
Or it's less load on the body, it's less impact on the body. We can actually increase our mileage, or we can just stay at the same without being beaten up as much. That's the difference between efficiency and economy. Like there's two differences: the cost per step by our movements, and then the metabolic cost and the oxygen required to maintain that pace. And it can be different through being stronger, being fitter. Like we can condition that. But running, the only way you can actually change the efficiency is changing movement.
We definitely will get into, you talk about the up and down movement as vertical oscillation, right? We're going to get into that and ground contact time. But before that, could you define or show what a perfect arm swing should look like?
I mean, the perfect is doing those three things that I told you about within that person's parameters. So like we can't just say, okay, well, look, I mean, if we want like a clear example of someone, or some people, like Eliud Kipchoge, very good arm swing, and it is repetitive from start to end. Letesenbet Gide, very good, particularly on the track. Joshua Cheptegei, pretty good. What else am I thinking? Jake Hayward, very good. Like I could say name a fair few of the athletes that I'll work with, and we can say they're really good. But thinking about the ones that people would know, I think they're good because they are. There's no tension through shoulders trying to swing their arms straight. They're in their angle. Okay, it's a shorter lever because the lower arms have closed up to the upper arm to create a shorter gap between wrist and glenohumeral joint, and they are driving with their elbow. They're getting a vertical movement.
So drive with the elbow, close arms, not wide.
Yeah, because we want to work close to our center of mass. Like the longer or the bigger you have with your arm, that's a big lever. Big levers cost time and effort. Two things we don't want, particularly when we're trying to do fast-paced things. We want a shorter lever, creating actually much more vertical movement. Long lever down next to your hip, that's just a flat movement that costs time and effort. Not going to be helpful.
And that's probably why some people have very low cadence, right? If their arms are moving so wide. Because if the arms are used,
it can be a component.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be a component, but if we go back to like the overstride, high braking force, long ground contact time, it takes a long time to get through each ground contact. So naturally, I can't actually get off the ground. So my cadence is going to be low. And the thing about just trying to shorten stride and increase cadence doing that lower leg dominant movement is They're just chopping down and doing a smaller version more times rather than actually, well, hang on. If we actually start to decrease the amount of time you're on the ground and decrease that braking force, you could probably maintain the same cadence, but it's actually a more efficient version of it. So the cadence isn't the problem, it's just the outcome.
So vertical oscillation, some people consider that excessive vertical movement as energy waster in running, right? But I hear you saying that our focus should be placed on propelling ourselves upward instead of forward. Can you explain why that's the case and why do most people think otherwise?
Well, what are we trying to do every footstep?
Move forward. Well,
Or what's the difference between walking and running?
One's jumping on one foot.
Yeah. Okay, so what direction do you have to go to jump?
Up.
Yeah. So as soon as you try and limit vertical oscillation, you don't get up. So we're not skateboards, we're not, segways, we're not hoverboards. We are leaving the ground, or ideally we're leaving the ground every single footstep. If you want to conserve energy, just fucking stand still.
Yeah.
Like that's not the nature of running though. Like we are trying to get somewhere and get somewhere fast or efficient and go a long distance faster than what we can when we're walking. If you want to conserve energy and get somewhere, walk, no problem. Like that is not an issue at all. But we're trying to run. And the most efficient version of running is in the air. To get in the air, we've got to go up. So if we actually limit vertical oscillation, okay, and we can go into two different variations of vertical oscillation as well, but if we want to limit vertical oscillation and flatten that out, how are we going to travel any distance in the air? How are we going to create any flight? We can't. So you're going to be back onto the ground again. Your foot's going to have to rush to the ground, which is going to be a higher velocity movement of the foot into the ground, which is a higher impact, a higher load. But I'm also going to have to do it more times because I'm not giving myself a chance to come up and over. Now we can go too far the other way where it becomes bounding.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's too far the other way as well. But I can tell you now, most people don't create enough vertical. So then we can go to what is vertical oscillation? Like it is our highest point and our lowest point, and it is the distance between our highest point of our center of mass and our lowest point of the center of mass. So that's vertical oscillation. Now, where we get lost is if you reach and pull, as you touched on earlier on, if you reach out and you pull, our center of mass drops and then comes up. Okay, so that vertical oscillation is actually much more of a negative vertical oscillation. And the stride length is more on ground than in air. Mm-hmm. Vertical ratio, okay, I think is a little bit more important than vertical oscillation. Okay. Because vertical ratio is vertical oscillation, the distance between our highest point and lowest point. So it could be, 8 centimeters. So anyone who's trying to limit their vertical oscillation is kind of kidding themselves, because we think about Kipchoge's world record. His vertical oscillation is probably around 7-8 centimeters. That's quite a lot. Okay. Stride length is about almost 2 meters, 1.9 to 2 meters. So that gives out vertical ratio. So vertical oscillation over stride length gives vertical ratio. So what we're trying to do is if you limit your oscillation, your stride length could be on the ground. We don't want it on the ground, we want it in the air. Okay. So again, if we go back to negative vertical oscillation means reach, you dip down, you come back up. Positive oscillation is you actually create vertical, you get in the air, you create flight in the air. Now that vertical oscillation number could be exactly the same, but one's done more on the ground, one's done more in the air, but they're given the same relative value. So VO could be, between me and you could have positive 10 centimeters and I could have negative 10 centimeters as mine's down up. Now we look at it and say, oh, we're exactly the same. We're not exactly the same. There's two different versions of it.
One's underground, sort of, and one's...
Yeah, it is. One's ground contact, one's flight dominant, or a higher component of flight, one's a higher component of ground contact. Okay. So vertical oscillation in itself isn't necessarily the best thing to look at, but limiting it, that's not going to help you with flight. We need it. We need it to get up off the ground. As I said, we're not segways, we're not skateboards. That's the whole skateboard. We go back to shit cues, skateboard and pull yourself forward. Yeah, pull yourself forward on the skateboard, no problem, because we're not trying to create any vertical flight. So we are literally trying to get ourselves forward. And the only thing that's going to slow us down is the friction of the wheels or the bearings. Yeah. So we just got to pull forward. We don't do that with running. We're going up.
But I'm sure someone is thinking and asking themselves, then how do I move forward if we're going up?
So within the first 3 or 4 steps, you create your momentum. Running is actually a maintaining momentum movement, not a running forward movement. Okay, so if we do it like a stationary object, okay, so like throwing a ball. If I want to throw the ball as far as I can, like obviously I've got to apply force to this ball, and I've got to apply as much force as I can actually apply to it. So you and I you could throw it 60 meters. I might be only able to throw it 40 meters, right? Just because the amount of force each of us can produce. However, for both of us to throw that ball as far as we can, given the amount of force that we can produce, the angle to create that length is at about 45 degrees. So this is from a stationary object. When we're running, our center of mass is already moving. Okay, so acceleration on a 100 meter, 200 meter, it's at about 45 degrees. Our first couple of steps, like we're applying force on that to try and create length per stride. We can't continually accelerate or apply force on a 45 degrees, so a 50-50 force vector. And as soon as we start creating momentum, at one point or another, we've got to start to create vertical. So our momentum is already being created within the first couple of steps of distance running. So you could be running 6 minutes per kilometer, 5 minutes, 4 minutes per kilometer. By the time we get to a pace that we want to maintain momentum, it costs more. Yeah. 80-20, 80 vertical, 20 horizontal.
Yeah. 80% of the effort is to go vertical, 20%
to
is
vertical.
horizontal.
It's got to get back off the ground again. Yeah. Because we're already
when you first said this to me 2 days ago, the first thing that came to my mind is like a flywheel, right? You need to get it going. And once it's going, all you do is maintain, right? It's kind of like, or it's like driving a car. You start with the first gear. Well, nobody has gears these days. It's all automatic. But...
Wow, some people have gears. That's our range of motion. Like our gears, and it's a really good point. Like, so our gears is our range of motion. Okay, so if we want to, take it easy, we want to go, low pace, small range of motion, small output, and lower on our cadence range. As we want to start to actually run faster, we do a bigger range of motion. So these are our gears. Our gears are range of motion and then rate of movement, which is cadence. So we do have gears and levers to pull.
Okay, let's go on a foot stride. You told me that foot stride, whether it's heel stride, midfoot stride, forefoot stride, is a byproduct of the way we move, and it should not be the focus. Could you explain that?
Well, I think the example I gave and the physical example I gave was, if I told you to jump up and down on the spot, and anyone can do this at the moment. It's like, just jump up and down on the spot like you're skipping rope. Okay. So what I'm trying to do there, or what I'm doing, is I'm telling you to create 100% vertical force. You're just going up and down and up and down, up and down. At no point did I say what muscles to use, and at no point did I tell you what part of the foot to land on. You applied a 100% vertical force and you just jumped up and down. As a byproduct, you landed on the midfoot. You used calf, Achilles, foot to store and return energy. It was an elastic movement. We didn't have to talk about it. And then I said, jump up and down on the spot, but off your heels. So hit the heel, push up off the front of the foot. Hit the heel, push up. And you're like, well, that feels shit. Yeah,
it's completely awkward. It's like...
And I told you to focus on landing. Okay, so like by focusing on the landing, and it felt terrible. So the landing wasn't actually the problem. It was, I told you to do it. When we said 100% vertical, you did it. When we run, if 80% of our forces are required to be vertical, and we are moving in the right direction and using the right levers within our mechanics, the landing will occur.
And that's what I noticed. Like I was saying to you before we hit record, that I went out for a 28-kilometer run this morning before getting on this call with you. And I spent that 28 kilometers focusing on the cues that you gave me and trying to figure out whether I was heel striking, midfoot striking. And when I was following, as you told me, with my arms driving forward, aiming 75 degrees forward, it was almost impossible to land on my heel. I was saying to you earlier as well, as once I internalized moving with my elbow, as in driving forward with my elbow, it kind of felt like when I was driving with my right arm, my right elbow, it felt like my left knee was connected to it and the knee was leading. And because the knee was leading, and when it landed, my foot was not in front of my knee. So basically, like you said just now, that it was more upper leg dominant than lower leg
Hmm.
dominant. The
Hmm.
lower leg was just like a floppy lever that just kind of went along with the motion,
Well,
and then it land.
it should be passive and follow. It's an amplifier of power when we are running with the upper leg. Like it is an amplifier. It's length. Like we want it, but it should just like follow fall, and then as
Exactly,
soon as
that's
we're applying
what you just did
force,
there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just like
So when it does
the
that,
upper
then
leg's
there's less
here,
braking force,
and
less
this
gravity.
one
That's
just
excellent.
the lower leg just kind of goes there, and then it lands, right? And then when it's
Yeah.
in this angle, it's almost impossible to land on your heel because unless you
Unless you have
dorsiflex,
dorsiflexion, toes up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
So you, or if the pavement is uneven, then maybe 1-2 strides, I get a heel stride. But for most of the 28K, it was just midfoot. I mean, I'm a heel striker. I mean, if you look at my shoes, it's very clear
Yeah,
that I'm a
I was
heel
going to say you'd
striker.
see a wear pattern, or
Yeah,
that you see your race photos, and like
yeah.
they'll tell you the story. But I think that the whole thing around no, I think the difficulty and the reason why we still have the discussions, I think in some cases some people have arguments, which it's not going to helpful, is it's such a focal point. It's a focus of so many people. It's like how you land, and we go back to like it's a sub maximal movement. You can do it and you can get away with it, and some people can actually run quite fast with it.
Hmm.
So it's if you don't want to change, no problem, but it's not the most efficient version of it because again, using that jumping up and down on the spot, as soon as you do jump up, land on your heel, push up, like that costs time, it's
Yeah.
impact, you can hear it. So thinking about it just in that sense, and it's not even a focal point, you can start to see like why it could be more helpful to do the other version. The thick Achilles, it's an elastic band.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason. If you hit your heel, you're not using it. So you're just creating movement through calf each footstep rather than actually absorbing and returning. And then
Compressing
we can
it.
go into like super shoes. Yeah. But then you go into the super shoes or the actual the foam that are used to absorb and return energy. Particularly the super shoes and the race shoes, they are designed off the physics of the movement. They're designed off that 80-20, that land, bounce back up, vertical. That is the geometry that they are designed from. So anything further away from that, you are not maximizing the shoe. Like you'll still get something out of it, but you won't get as much out of it as what you can.
And you might get an injury, right? You hear a lot of times on social that people get injured running in super shoes. Is it because their movement pattern is not in line with how the shoes are designed for them to be moving in?
Well, similar to like when we talked about the lower leg, the shoe's an amplifier. So it can be an amplifier for good,
Or for
or it can
bad.
be an amplifier for bad. So it's high stack height. It is softer foam. If it is placing and putting more leverage through, medially or laterally through structures that aren't necessarily designed to have that leverage put, it's going to amplify that movement. So it can
So,
be, but it's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
It's not the problem necessarily. It's just being highlighted by them, I think.
Well, while we're talking about the feet, let's talk about cadence, right? It's very well established that 180 is kind of like the universal target, but I
No, it's
realize the
not. No, it's
cadence,
not.
yeah, I
No, it's
realize the
not.
cadence
No, it's not.
changes with running speed, with different biomechanics. So, at the same speed, it seems logical that a tall runner would have a different cadence to a short runner. So, is there an optimal cadence that is specific to an individual runner for a specific speed rather than a universal cadence for everyone?
No, there's
No.
not even
Okay.
a specific range because
Okay.
you got to take into like conditioning and fitness.
Mm.
Someone who is fitter and moving really well can hold a higher cadence for a longer period of time, but still staying within their, the zones that they want to work within. So like even then, it's not the nature and the beauty of running is that the competitive advantage of a short person, like let's these two examples where we're assuming that both of them move relatively well biomechanically. Okay, so the competitive advantage of a shorter person is they have shorter levers and shorter steps. Now, it costs less per step. That's their competitive advantage. However, they have to take more steps to cover the same distance for a given
Hmm.
pace. The long, tall, long legged, you know,
Yeah.
long levers, their competitive advantage is, they got long levers. It takes less steps to get from A to B. However, each one of those steps costs a little bit more. So we've got this competitive advantage between those two athletes. Now, that's not even taking into consideration, history of running and conditioning and, like how fit are they, what are they? So that's just in an efficiency and mechanical sense alone. Once we start to add, inefficiencies, leakage of energy, then we're starting to go, okay, well, now that's going to be costing more for one or less for the other, so that becomes, a variable. The notion of a singular cadence, like let's not even worry about where it came from to start with.
Okay.
Let's just think about it. Like the two levers we have to pull when we are running in a mechanical sense to run faster or slower is stride length and cadence.
Okay.
Yeah. And even taking away like the short lever, long lever, let's just say it's like to run faster. If we want to increase our stride length at the same cadence, we'll run faster. Once we get to our full range and our application of force, then we have to do more of them to go faster. So our two levers are stride length and cadence.
Yeah.
By saying you have to run at a magical number, not even taking into consideration a 6'8" person compared to a 5'2" person.
Yeah.
Like let's take those stupidities away. It's like, okay, now all you've got is 180. Now the only way that you run faster or slower is to increase or decrease your stride length.
Yeah.
Forget height, leg length. That's it.
Yeah.
You run at 180. But then you go, okay, well, at what point does that 180 become higher? Because you can't run 180 for 100 meters. Like as a 100-meter sprinter, you can't run 180. 200 meters, can't run 180. Down to 800 meters, can't run 180. Yeah, but then, imagine that. Like you go to ultra marathon, you're saying you're just going to get stuck in first gear and rev the shit out of your engine.
Yeah.
And wonder why, like it's costing you so much. So it's like, no. No matter what, that's it. Like I think, it sounds really stupid when we flip that. Okay, so let's say, like for the purpose of this argument, everyone has to run with a stride length of 1.1 meters.
Okay.
Everyone.
Okay.
You're 5'2", you're 7 foot, and everything in between. Yeah. You have to stick to 1.1 meter stride length. And the only lever now we have to pull is increase cadence, decrease cadence. Sounds stupid when we put it that way. And yet everyone bought into, no, one cadence better for you.
Yeah. So myth busted,
and now we
right?
go,
cadence is out the door.
It's just, no, it's not out the door because it's not the only lever. You're just not like a stick at that 180. It's like,
okay, yeah.
More often than not, it is used as go to 180 because there is a lower leg overstride, a ground contact time that is increased, spending a lot of time on the ground. So then there's a low cadence. It's like, okay, well, you got to pick your cadence up. Shorten your stride, pick your cadence up. How about we change the mechanic that's creating that braking force and ground contact time? So it's actually understanding the cadence is the output. The input we need to focus on, not just, change that number.
What I get it from the couple of hours that I've spent with you thus far is that foot stride, ground contact time, cadence are not the focal points, but they're all just the downstream results of the way we move from other parts of the body, right? So
outcomes.
Yeah, they're just outcomes, right? And yeah, it's very hard to tell somebody increase your cadence. How do you do that? Are you trying? You try and move faster, they're going to start running faster.
Let's start running faster. Yeah.
Same thing with ground contact time that I want to talk about next, right? If you tell someone that you need to get off the ground faster, I think for most people, what's going to happen is they're going to start running faster. But yes, you can run faster, but I think the idea of a lower ground contact time is to get off the ground faster at the same pace.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and the first thing most people do is they try and pull up off the ground.
Yeah.
It's like, just keep pulling up off the ground. But
and the harder you pull off the ground, you're going to end up moving faster, and then you're going to
moving faster. It's a combination of all these things of like arm swing, knee drive, hip extension to push off the ground. So I think we touched on it the other day. It's like we want all these things, and that's why I said it's a symphony of movements and timing. Is that we want our two arms and our leg that's off the ground. So this is when we're on the ground. Like the one foot is on the ground at each time. Sometimes both are off the ground. We want 3 limbs driving up to assist with that vertical force to get off the ground, and the one limb that is on the ground to be pushing up as well. all in the same line to work together to actually then get off the ground. If we just lift off the ground, we're not applying force to our mass. So it's just lift, 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 lift. How are we moving this? So we end up spinning.
Correct.
And as you said, it's like we're just going to spin. We need all of these things happening at the same time. Now, some of those components are used to create like the upper leg or initiating a movement and the recovery phase of our stride with the upper leg. So we can create that lift through, but it's not the only piece to the puzzle. That's to start to use the upper leg. Then we want to use the upper leg to drive up, and then we want to put them together. And you mentioned even earlier, it's like I started to swing and I started to feel the knee drive to come up with it.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the cues I'll use. It's like, matching marching, where you can actually create elbow and knee swing happening together, because we want the humerus and the femur, like the upper arm and the upper
Opposite,
leg.
right? Opposite.
The opposite side, to be driving together. Now that's one component. But at that same time that, the right elbow and the left knee is driving, we've also got the right leg, right foot pushing.
Pushing, yeah.
So there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle happening. And again, going back to why we only do one thing at a time. Because then at one point or another, you go, I'll add that movement, that position, that movement, that movement. Now we need to start to connect them, and we need to time them, and we need to make them occur at the same time. And the ground contact that you talked about is, you can get better at that even in a conditioning sense. So it's even like taking away just movement of biomechanics. I think what I do is a piece of the puzzle. Strength and conditioning, huge piece of the puzzle. Training, huge piece of the puzzle. Sleep, nutrition, hydration, huge pieces of the puzzle. Technology, whether it be shoes or wearables, like all pieces to the puzzle. The movement side of it to get off the ground, if you can actually create that, bounce up and down like you're skipping, the better you get at absorbing and returning, and like stiffness under load. So not before it, stiffness under load. So it's creating stiffness as you hit the ground and spring back up again.
Yep.
That can reduce ground contact time as well. So it's not just movement, it's your body's ability to absorb and return in a shorter space of time to get back off the ground again.
Is it also fair to say that with the arm drive and the knee drive upwards and forwards, that deload is one of the ways, or one of the
100%.
mechanisms for reducing ground contact time, right? And not lifting
100%.
the leg that's on the ground, but it's the play of, like you said, the other three limbs that are deloading the body, that are working to deload the body off the ground, that results in the limb that is on the ground having a lower ground contact.
The simplest version of that is like if you do your jumping up and down on the spot.
Yep.
And you do it with your hands in your pockets to start with. So nothing is helping you. You're just using your legs and your calf, foot, Achilles to actually, bounce. You can do a good job of it. It's really nice and light because you're just, working in the correct direction. Now, if I got you to use your arm swing that you learnt the other day. So what we're going to do is like jump, like just do that same jump. And this is where timing becomes really important, because you're like, I absorb, I return. I absorb, I return. So you can actually use that arm swing movement just to understand what the timing feels like. And what you'll feel is I can actually get back off the ground easier and quicker, and maybe even jump a little bit higher, because now I'm actually swinging these two parts in a direction that's helping, rather than having my hands in my pockets and they're not helping. So you can still do it with hands in pockets, but it's easier when you're actually making that movement. Then if you started to do that as you run, then you're like, oh, that's actually helping me get off the ground. I am getting up, rather than put my hands in my pockets and not really getting up. And then if you have your hands in your pockets when you start running, you're going to start to do this because you're going to try and find a counter movement from somewhere. You need a counter movement to actually allow the legs to swing. So your body will find it because your hands are in your pockets and you're not actually giving them the opportunity to use your arms.
Yeah. What I thought about a lot today when I was running at 20 kilometers is like my shoulders and my head was like a hanger, and my upper arm is like two strings, and there's a weight down below, and it's just swinging very well. The swing is kind of like a pendulum, right, going up and down. And with every time the pendulum swings up, like someone sitting on the swing, when you get to the highest point, there's almost no weight, right? When you're up in ground, up in the air, the weight only comes as you're coming back down. I mean, if someone wants to think about that, that could be a way of trying to envision how the torso and the arms are moving. So this part kind of stays quite still.
Yes.
The rotation is just in the joint, not this way.
Yes.
And the movement is just a very light pendulum swing of the arm.
Yeah. So, and the coat hangers are really good one, because if you actually think about them really still and swinging up off it, then you can be relaxed. Okay, so often we hear this, oh, relax your arms or be relaxed, and they'll go, relax your cheeks or relax your hands and the shoulders, but so relax your hands and your wrists, but they're holding tension in shoulders. Why aren't we
Yeah.
focusing on shoulders? Like, okay, disengage the muscles you have switched on. Now you are relaxed, rather than doing everything you can just to try and relax through everything else, bar the shoulders. So being actually disengaged and holding a neutral position and then swinging up off stillness is a really great way to do it with as you said, like the coat hanger. Now, what do you think is going to happen to the hips if your shoulders and chest are staying still? Not stiff, just still. What do you think is going to happen to the hips?
They are not going to over rotate.
No.
Wait, let me think.
No, you're on the right track.
They're not going to over rotate. And there is this notion about your hips sinking sometimes when you run. I don't remember what you called it, but I don't notice
hip
that
drop.
The hip drop. I didn't notice that when I was running. Sometimes in my old way, when I would land and push, I felt that.
Yep.
I felt the weight from my shoulders. I felt the weight from my hips. And you try and brace yourself to counter the hip drop. But when I'm deloading with my arm swing and my knee, I didn't feel the hip drop. And then, we're going to get into posture very soon. I said this to you before we actually hit record, that I felt like my torso and my head felt very centered over my upper torso. And it felt like my torso was kind of lighter and straighter, not weighted down. Like this might be a shit cue that you hear people say, lean forward and try and reach your leg forward to counter your fall forward.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Because once we get too far forward, so running is like movement and counter movement, and then position and counter position. So if our movement is off, our counter movement's going to be off. If our position is off, we have to counter position off as well. So if they're not in that structure, in that kind of column, in that 75 degrees, working in that position and in those direction of movements, then the counter movements are going to have to be compromised, or they're going to have to counter. So I often see, like, you get athletes turning up and saying, I've got this like foot flicky thing. It like flicks around. And you watch the whole top half of their body and their arms doing the exact same movement, or they're like got this big rotation. You're going, how are you going to straighten your leg out when you got your arm doing this and you're going to go and do this movement? It's a counter movement that has to like flick around as well.
Yeah.
So those position, counter position, movement, counter movement, they have to work together so they can align. Now, they're not necessarily going to clean all of it up just by changing the arm swing, but it's actually going to bring it in because it doesn't have to counter a poor movement anymore. But it's habitually being flicking around. So at some point or another, if it's going to be more efficient, we'd change that. The hips, the reason why I asked you about the hips is like if we are still in our torso, in our chest, in our rib cage, our hips can stay still as well. If the hips are still, they can be stronger and they can be more stable. If we've got movement happening through that rib cage, the hips have to counter move. And now it's a part of the movement pattern of running. And it's like, okay, I'm going to roll and wonder why I can't have hip stability or hip control. It could be as strong an athlete as like that you've seen, and they've got this hip roll or hip drop because the impact is high, like you talked about, as ground contact. And my torso is now a part of the movement pattern rather than my torso is there for structure. I am the framework. I'm trying to apply force between my hips and the ground. So the application of force between 2 points. If my hips are stable and the ground doesn't give way, I can apply force between 2 points and maximize that force. Yeah. As soon as the hips start moving, now I'm applying force between solid ground and moving up here, I'm going to leak energy. If I run on sand, now all of a sudden sand is moving, I'm leaking energy from sand and I'm leaking energy through my hips. That is a lot of leakage of energy. The easiest or simplest version of that, like if we use it in like a cycling terminology, it's like your pedal and your seat is loose and you're trying to pedal along, but you're just leaking energy because the application of force between 2 points is being lost, is leaked.
Correct, yeah.
But when we can keep really still through our chests and our shoulders, not stiff, so it's not about locking down, it's actually like applying the movements in the right area so that this can stay still, then the hips can stay still. When the hips can stay still, they can be stable and you can actually bounce and you can apply force.
On the point of hips, I know I'm going to use the wrong terms and you can correct me. A lot of us recreational runners are quad or hamstring dominant, right? We drive with our quads or we claw with our hamstrings, and we are underusing our glutes
Yes.
and not extending our hips,
Correct.
But when you look at an elite runner, they have this almost perfect triple extension. And by that, I mean by their hips, their knee, and their ankle is almost like in a straight line as their foot is behind their center of mass. Why is activating the glutes and extending the three lower joints a more efficient movement pattern? And, how can someone fix that so that they can have a better triple extension?
Well, it's a more powerful movement. Okay, like
Okay.
so we're using the glute to actually drive, out of the ground. I think I would say like the really good movers get that photo or get that image and get that triple extension. There are some
Yeah.
elites that don't, but there's less and less, particularly at the high end. There are less of them that is getting into that position. The reason being is like we can produce more force with that movement.
Okay.
The hamstrings aren't necessarily, they're not supposed to be a propulsion provider, so they're not trying to pull us forward. We're not supposed to have a shortening between, the top and bottom of the hamstring to create force. When the foot is on the ground, they should actually slide. It's a stabilizer. And as we start to extend at, the glute or the hip and extend at the knee, so the joint at the hip is closing and the joint at the knee is opening. So it actually should be staying the same length. It's not actually using my foot to pull myself forward and shortening my hamstring. The hamstring is a series of long, thin muscles over two joints. The glute, if you think of the architecture of it, the glute is a big fat muscle over one joint at the top of the whole chain. It's going to have a better ability to create high amounts of force or create a force for an extended period of time.
Okay, yeah.
So they're running fast to start with. So they've got to get into a position where they're actually doing this big movement. But the really good movers, they are driving out of the ground. If we go back to like the timing is really important. So under speed, your time frame to be able to absorb and produce force is really quite small. We'll go easy pace. We think about like it's like the computer game. When you're playing that old school golf, you've got like the driver. The time frame in which you like swing, you like hit the sweet spot is tiny. But as we get out to like the shorter clubs, it opens up. Similar to running, easy pace. We've got more time on the ground, so to absorb and apply force is like it's a bigger gap to create timing. As we start to run faster, the time on ground naturally, whether you're amateur or elite, the time frame reduces because we're running faster. So to create and understand and do the timing really, really well, it'll be pretty good. So their ability to do that, to absorb and then push back out of the ground again within that time frame is elite. But they start that push up and that extension movement when their foot is underneath their body. By the time they finish that movement, they're in that classic picture that you're talking about. So they're not trying to push into that angle. They're pushing. So hips and foot, they've absorbed. Now they start to push and the center of mass is still going forward. And they finish or they complete the movement on that angle, which is like driving out as well. So that's where you kind of your 20% gets to.
So it's still it's a byproduct at the end of the day.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Because again, we've got to go back to the center of mass is always moving, or ideally, we don't want it to stop and start again because that costs us more.
Yeah,
it is already moving, and it's moving at a rapid rate for those elites. Okay. The simplest we can go kind of two ways with it. So if I needed you to help me push my car because it's broken down, I need you to help me to move it out of the way or jump start it. I'll give you two options.
Okay.
Would you stand behind the car and push me forward? Or would you stand in front of the car with your ass to the bonnet and pull the car forward? Which one would you do?
Push for sure, yeah. Push from the back.
Yeah. We're amplifying the mass here by saying there's a car. We need to move it.
Yeah.
Okay. This is our mass. Obviously, nowhere near as much as the car.
Correct.
But this is still the mass. We are trying to move forward. We want to push it up and out and push it up and out. By you standing with your butt to the bonnet, you're reaching forward with your foot and you're using your hamstring to try and pull forward. No way you're going to move it.
Yeah.
So
there's enough power.
There's not, it's not enough. And he's like, what am I doing here? There's no, let alone trying to grip it and all that sort of stuff. But the simple version is I will add mass to this example, and straight away you're like, oh, I push it, because it is a much more powerful movement. So even if we were running and I stood in front of you and I just put my hand on your chest and made you run with me creating some resistance, and I just sort of gently took away the resistance at one point or another, because you're lower leg dominant, you go, okay, I'm trying to drive out because I'm applying force to you and resistance. You would use your upper leg and you drive out, and until I'd let you go, unless you continue that movement pattern, you would probably go back to that lower leg. But again, it's just like a smaller example of increasing the mass to change your movement pattern. If we go, the other example is, and you hear it a lot of times with athletes, it's like, I feel like I run better uphill. Like depending on how steep it is, they'll get to a point, and the hill is a constraint. So it'll get to a point where it forces you to land and push up and land and push up and start to use the upper leg. Yes, the incline of the hill will make you kind of get on top of or further forward on the foot to actually drive up as well. Now, some people don't, and they continue with their lower leg, and they're like, I fucking hate hills because I just get so tired and my hamstrings are so cooked. It's because, they're still trying to drag themselves
up the hill.
Right?
Yeah.
So for an athlete like that, you go, okay, well, you start to see the moving, like, well, no shit, because you're just using that pulling mechanic. And then the last one is like the constraint that actually forces you into the correct mechanic for running, even though it doesn't give you, or doesn't normally give you too much flight, is if I put someone in front of a set of stairs and say, run up one stair at a time, you're forced to go lift knee, foot stays under knee, push up, lift knee. If I use a lower leg mechanic running upstairs, I'm going to kick the next step and trip over. So the constraint is forcing the person to run upstairs with a running mechanic. And this is why drills don't necessarily work too well, because you can do that with, high knees and running on the spot and creating skips and drills and all that sort of stuff. And it does like that. The drill is the constraint, and it forces someone to move in a certain manner. But unless you then implement that movement pattern within your running, it's just a drill. It's just a warm up. So it's like, okay, if we'll use that drill, we'll use wickets. Now I want you to run in the same manner with no wickets, like you're running on wickets. Because we're trying to use that constraint to create a movement, and you think about everything we do in a drill sense is actually up. And yet we still think that running is a forward movement, everything. So we're trying to actually get, what's a knee drive? If my foot goes so far behind the body, I don't have time to actually get a knee drive because my foot just kind of has to whip over and then get forward again. So even by actually the timing that we get off the ground and what we use to initiate, the flight phase, what part of the leg, all these things are components to the biomechanic or the movement of running.
That makes so much sense, especially the car analogy.
Just exaggerate what we're trying to do. And like we're trying to move mass, okay, exaggerate it. I'll increase the mass. I'm going to stand behind it. A weighted sled, stand in front of a weighted sled and pull it.
Yeah, you're going to drive your glutes, right?
Drive it out.
Yeah, you're not going to reach forward with your feet and try and pull the sled. Yeah. When we had the session 2 days ago, I had no idea what I was going in for, right? But like I said earlier, I left the session with a complete reframe of how I thought about the way I moved through space when I ran, and it was really, truly very impactful. But I know that we only touched the surface, and there's still a lot of room for improvement if we continue with a few more sessions. So if someone that's listening is serious about improving their running form and wants to work with you virtually online, can you walk them through what can they expect during the first session?
The first session, it's an eye-opener for a lot of people because I'll get them to send me videos of them running so I can understand their movement patterns. Look, what I do is like pattern recognition. So it's understanding the patterns of movement that they create, the loading or the forces. So once I can see that, then we can go through the session that we did, and they can expect to be given a real understanding of how they move currently and where they might be missing out on efficiencies or where they might be creating increased amount of force or loads in an area. Now, more often than not, because, as I talked about, a high percentage of athletes will get an injury because running is by nature, it's like we'll run further and faster and further and faster. We're always pushing. So at some point or another, there's a breaking point. Even if you move perfectly, if you don't load correctly, if you do too much, if you have too many sessions in a week, you can get injured even if you move perfectly because it's just the nature of creating conditioning. But how they move will 99 times out of 100 tell the story as to why they've been getting what they've been getting, or why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah.
So that first part of just understanding, geez, I never really thought of it like that, or now I'm starting to get a better understanding of my body. I spend so many hours a week out running, and I've never thought about how I actually move.
Yeah.
Then we can go into, okay, this is how we start to improve that, how we start to change that. And the process and the cues are as important as each other. And the process, I think, has been the problem about running and running biomechanics for such a long period of time, because the process has always been foot and leg related. It's always foot and leg focused. The process of understanding that the whole system works together, and if it isn't working together, it's not working for you. So being able to understand that the process of the top down allows us to get into the torso, allows us to then start to possibly change the leg pattern. Some people's leg patterns are awesome, but everything from the hips up is actually compromising the ability to maximize a really good movement pattern. So even that, it's not everyone's going through the same process, or having to go through the same cues. So whether it's in person, that's kind of what they go through. But even online, it's like that process and the cues are the super important part. You know, the feedback that an individual can get is they can video and look at themselves running and go, I've never looked at that before. They can be confronting, because if you don't look at yourself run, or there's, people that get race photos, like, oh, I hate my race photos, they always look shit. I mean, of course they're going to, towards the end when you're stuffed and you've probably got a little bit of spit on your chin, and like, you're never looking your prettiest. But I think it's a really important and really helpful tool to actually watch yourself run when fresh and just running easy, to go, oh, I never, oh, is that what I look like? Oh, I never really realized that. And don't look at it like with a critical mind. It's just like, where could I actually get something? Where could I improve with not having to spend $200 on protein, or, buy $450 shoes? Like, why can't I improve what I do every single step to actually make it easier or get more out of it? And then follow the process of like the top down. And there's simpler versions of it because you're not getting the one-on-one feedback. But I tell you now, it's very valuable. You can get a lot out of it because it's just working within the physics. It's working within that column of like, if you have your movements in the right place and on the right direction and producing force in a direction that's going to help and in a timing that's going to help, straight away you'll get improvements from it.
I really like the way you drew attention to the different parts. You went through each body part and you drew attention to it. And then you made the switch, or you gave me the cue to make the switch. And it was just in my brain. It was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Why I never thought about that? Right? And I walked away thinking that made so much sense. Why the hell didn't I ever realize that before?
Because we never talk about the physics of it.
Yeah, until you drew attention to each part of my body and explained the physics. And then it just made so much sense. I mean, I remember coming back saying to my wife, "Oh, that was really good." I mean, I'm changing the way I run.
Well, I mean, we change how we swing our golf club. We change our swim stroke. If there's some triathletes listening, our bike setup, our swim stroke is so important because the efficiency and the hydrodynamics and what we're trying to do, it costs a lot. If you swim poorly, people don't just go, "Oh no, it's just how they swim." They just like get through it and you train harder. And yet we still have this fucking notion with running. It's like, you just run. It finds the best version. It finds the best way. People say they just find the best way. The body finds the best way for their body to run. Is essentially saying they don't believe in physics. They don't believe in the ability for the body to produce force on certain directions. It's like, no, they're fine. The problem hasn't been how people run. The problem has been how they've been taught to change. So it's been so poorly done that it has been dangerous, and it has created this fear around, oh, don't change how you run. No, don't change it incorrectly. Don't change it poorly. You could say that about every single movement pattern in the world. You don't go to a shit golf coach.
Yeah.
Like, you don't go to a shit swim coach and say, okay, no, they're shit at it. But running, I think it's flipped. There's been very few people who do it well. And then it's not limited. It's not pretending like I'm the only person. It's just like, it's a smaller amount of people that can do it and do it really well. So like everything, like the vast majority, if it is poorly done, we can still have that conversation. And understandably, we can still have that conversation around, oh, I don't know, just don't change it. Or we wait until someone's injured, then we change it.
Yeah.
No, we can do it. If we do it in the right manner, with the right process and the right cues, in the right direction, then we can actually get really good results out of it. And it's a safe version, and we can continue with our running. You don't have to go, okay, we're going to start from scratch. I can continue my running. If it feels lighter, it is less impactful on you. So you can continue doing the same thing.
And it's more enjoyable when you actually feel lighter. Way
well,
more
that's
enjoyable.
the good bit. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not clawing through your last kilometer if you feel lighter.
Like lighter, you've said it a few times, lighter. Often that's a cue, run lighter. Can't just fucking run lighter. You got to move in a manner that feels lighter.
That makes you run lighter. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you run lighter,
outcome.
Right?
Yeah. I'll run light.
Exactly.
How do I run light? And you get
everything that you hear
run light.
Yeah. Increase your cadence, reduce your ground contact time, run lighter. But how do you do it? You can't do it by
you change your movement, you change your body position. Exactly. And you move in a manner that's more helpful, using and prioritizing areas that are really good at it, not areas that can do it, but not as well as others. Mm-hmm. Things like wearables are getting better and better at giving more information of the outcomes. And I noticed you the other day, you're wearing the stride pods. Yeah. And there's really clear, like whether some people are wearing it or not, like taking away just like the basic metrics of left and right contact time, or because you can have a 50-50 left and right ground contact time. So you see it and go, nailing it. But within that even or symmetrical ground contact time, you could be doing two different things. It's just the timing is even. It's not telling you the movements are even. Now, unlikely or less likely that's going to happen, but it can. So things like vertical ratio, impact load rate, leg spring stiffness, those things are actually telling you if you have a high leg spring stiffness, you are absorbing and returning energy really well. You are bouncing off the ground like you are, jumping rope.
Yeah.
If your impact load rate is lower, it's costing you less per step. Now, how you get that is the changing of the movement and how you hold yourself in space to create a better or a worse number. Okay, so those metrics and those ones in particular are creating really good feedback, but it still comes back to like that's a little pod telling you what's happening rather than how do you change it.
Correct. Yeah, it's just giving you the feedback of what's actually happening, but it's not telling you, or it's telling you what you need to change, but it's not telling you how to change.
Yeah, where you might be missing out on some. Yeah. And then that becomes part of the feedback loop. Then you can go back to, okay, I'll change something. Like I'll see someone or I'll go through the process and I'll go, okay, if that is that, then what should I work on? And then I start to work on that. And how is that affecting, the outcomes that I'm trying to change? You go, cool, I've got this positive change. Keep on it. Like keep working on that. Or if it's like the footpath, the footpath is highlighting that there's a real asymmetry in the movements. Oh shit, I got actually, where do I want to go? Like that feedback is, the part of the loop. It's saying, okay, well, now I've got to work on this side to do this movement. And how does that actually affect change? And if it's a positive change, I keep on it.
On that point, I used to have the paid membership for Stride where you can actually see the footpath. If you don't have the paid membership, you can only see the power. And I stopped paying the membership because I didn't know what to do with the freaking data.
Yeah.
I see the data, but like, what am I going to do about it? How do I move my leg? You can't just think about moving that leg a certain way to correct the movement, right?
Well, and as you said, you focused on leg, which understandably, because it's giving you a footpath. And I get it because you're like, oh, I'll try and straighten that or I'll increase that. But you're driving down with your hands like this and wondering why you're not getting it. And you had the asymmetry, the left was actually going further out. And you go, why is this not the same as that? But you still be doing this and you're trying to straighten out your footpath.
Correct.
So again, going back to it's like it's a whole system of it's a symphony of movements and positioning and saying, okay, well, they all influence each other. We need to work them as a whole, not just to change the footpath. But again, it is really good information to say, okay, something's off.
Yeah.
And then you can, record yourself or get someone to look at it and say, this is off, go to this cue, this cue, this cue, or, we'll go through this, whatever it is based on your movement pattern. And then you go back into seeing what's going on. You go, that's cleaned up. Well, that's cleaning up. Yeah. That's getting better. So then we go, cool, what can I work on? What's next? Or is it exaggerating that movement so that it can, feel like it's getting closer or seeing like the outcomes are getting closer?
Yeah, to that point, I mean, when I was running my 28 kilometers this morning, I was thinking I want to get back the paid version for Strike so I can see what my old path was like if I run in the old way and then change and see what difference it makes, because that's the only way I can think about seeing that change with the new movement patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, but and because half the battle when we're running is if we don't have that kind of metric or the feedback, it's just about pace and heart rate, which is, like it's a version of, and it's highlighting our fitness and our conditioning, but it's not necessarily highlighting our movement
Hmm.
and the efficiency of the movement. So it gives us the impact. And not everyone loves it, not everyone wants it, which is fine as well. But if you're like into it and you're like, I want to actually get better at this specific component of running, and
The
like
skill of
I've got
running.
this kind of like, yeah, the skill of running. Like I've got this
Yeah.
logic, you know, logic brain, really logic
Yeah.
physics kind of brain. They don't necessarily work together, but all the times. But the logic in me, it's like, hang on, if I'm going to be running 20 kilometers, 60 kilometers, 160 kilometers a week, I want to be doing that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I'm going to be going out and playing golf, I'm just going to like hack around and go, no, I actually want to get better at swinging and
You get a
putting and
coach.
chipping. Like I want to, what I am doing each time I hit the ball, I want to do that better. And when we're
Yeah.
running, it's like, I want to do that better.
Better.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to spend all this time and money and effort and, emotional effort and
Yeah.
energy into it. It's like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't I want to do it better? And then you go to your point that you said before, if you do it better, you enjoy it more. And you have like
Yeah. Yeah.
this, oh,
Exactly.
this is
Yeah.
really
It's
great.
so much more
This
enjoyable
is really
when you,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, when you feel like you're in control of your movements and that is moving the right way. You feel so much better when you're moving through space when you're running. Okay, we are going over time, and I'm sorry about that. So as we land the plane,
That's okay.
uh,
Like I'm passionate about. I love this stuff because it is like I think it's a real low hanging fruit for people to be able to get some improvements as well. Like and it's kind of like in a manner that's easily digestible. Like it's simpler than what we think if we do it in the correct manner and work just on the correct line. Like and if it is, it's not a for me. It's like it's not a method. It's not because if a method was the right way, it'd just be the way. So it's like that's why the physics governs everything for me that I do because physics isn't that's not a method of mine. That's just the laws of physics and
nature.
how do we
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, yeah, how do we work within and move in a
That
manner that works within
boundaries.
those
Yeah.
laws. Yeah. So that's
Correct.
why
Like a
it's like
door hinge,
that's
right?
the
If the door
important
hinge is going to
piece.
swing this way, it's never going to go this way.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you kind
It's
of have to
it's
build
not.
it within the physics of the hinge, right? Yeah. Okay. As we land the plane, what is one running form change that someone listening can do today that would actually make a big difference in their running experience? The easiest, lowest hanging fruit that someone can do.
Well, I think I mean, and it is all not always, but it's more often than not the first protocol for me. It's just like the arm swing. Get an
Okay.
arm swing that is even, symmetrical, and helps you get off the ground. So as long as they are working together, left and right, to assist with getting off the ground, you're going to start to see some benefit. Now, if you're focusing on the right part and you're moving the right amount, it's going to get even more. But at least if you're actually going to start to think about moving in the right direction to help you get off the ground and make it even, you're going to get something out of it. What I would say is like my normal first port of call is film yourself run, get some self awareness, understand what you do, and at the very least make everything as even as possible.
Hmm.
But I think as a cue sense, and because we've talked so much about the role of arm swing and how it can contribute, that can be all right. Get close to your center mass, not tight. Get close, swing up. Help you to get off the ground every step and create that timing of getting off the ground every step with that movement.
And can I add that after you record yourself, go on YouTube, look for Eliud Kipchoge, compare how your arm swing is to his, and see where you can improve to get your arm swing closer to what his arm swing is, right?
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
we don't compare ourselves to Elise, and nor should we, but because they're phenomenal. But we want to compare ourselves not because they're fast, but because they move well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that. And I've told this story on a few different, and it's kind of like my buddy Chris Cook's story, but he wasn't even involved in the Breaking Two project to start with because his capacity, his engine, was lower than all the others that they put forward. So his VO2 max was lower. But because he
Okay.
moves in a manner that maximizes what he has, his movements are in a manner that you're efficient and maximizing his engine as opposed to leaking energy. That's
Yeah.
why I was like, he's the guy that ended up being the greatest marathoner we've seen up until recently, or the
Okay.
fastest marathon. I still think he's the greatest. I think he's not necessarily the fastest now, but because
Yeah.
his
It's not.
movements actually. So compare ourselves and understand and learn from athletes that move well,
Mhm.
not just that move fast.
Yeah. I didn't mean the fast part. I mean like. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're saying it, but I think it's a really
Yeah.
critical thing. It's like, oh, that person, doesn't have great technique and they're fast. Yeah, because it's still submaximal. They've got a massive engine, but they need a massive engine to be competitive because their movements are costing more. We still have a real big variable within running, like good. It's getting smaller and smaller. You'll see the faster runners and those times that are getting, particularly in the marathon, faster and faster. There's less and less of the anomalies of like poor movers. They're like, oh, they're all actually moving closer and closer to similar to each other because you can't get away with poor movement patterns anymore.
Yeah. Well, Paul, my final question to you is, what does endurance mean to you?
Oh, I'm probably going to go a little sideways with this. I don't even normally is like the running, but endurance is an ability to endure a situation. Like in this case, we talk about running, and the situation is trying to endure an extensive period of time on feet. But I see it as in a life context, like, you know, like enduring could be tough times, like enduring and keeping positive or keeping stable in those tough times. And I think endurance is, you need to work on it in all those different contexts. I think, but that was where my mind went firstly, was actually like enduring in a broader sense of life. You know, like I think that's where I went to first. Yeah.
Paul, thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it. I love talking about this stuff.